Shalom Aleichem. Appreciate everybody jumping on. Okay. David, Kalev. All right, I appreciate y'all. Cool. All right. Parshas Yisro. Parshas Yisro. Major Parsha, right? Parsha where we receive the Torah, Har Sinai and all of its greatness and glory. So everything that has happened up until this point in existence, since creation, is leading up to this point, right? So the Chachamim point something out, though, something interesting that Chazal say. It says Vayomer Yisro Baruch Hashem, right? Yisro says Baruch Hashem, and the Chazal say that it's a shanda, it's a shame that of all the greatness and the great people who had come before Yisro, that this is the first time that Hashem's praise had been sung. Yisro, the Kohen Midian, right, the priest of the idol worship, of all global idol worship, comes and says Baruch Hashem, and it's seen as like the first time that this is happening. So Chazal say, they say, what a shame that this is the first time this is going down. So they also say, let me go ahead and mute. I got you. Appreciate you, love. Okay. And then so then they also point out, how could they say that this is the first time that this has happened, right? First time that somebody has praised Hashem? What about Shira, right? It was just Shabbos Shira, where the Az Yashir was sung, and this whole idea of praising Hashem, Shir La Hashem. They're singing praise to Hashem already. So what could they mean by that? Okay, by the Kriyas Yamsuf, when the sea split, they come out the other side. The Egyptians get drowned in the Yamsuf, and Moshe Rabbeinu and all the Jewish people, they're out there singing. They're singing Shir La Hashem. Okay, so then it goes like this. So then he says, so you can't say that this hadn't happened before, that nobody has sung for Hashem. But the Zohar comes and explains it like this. It says, when Yisro comes along and he says Baruch Hashem, and he says Ve'ata Yadaiti, for now I know that Hashem is greater, right? Mikola Elokim, greater than all the other gods. Should be some obvious questions with that lashon, right? Obvious questions should pop up. But he explains like this. There's another pasuk, and the Zohar makes a connection here. He says, So they're trying to explain, the Zohar is trying to explain, why was it that even though people had sung praises for Hashem beforehand, why was it not until Yisro comes along and he says Baruch Hashem? So if you want to say, yeah, Moshe Rabbeinu sang Shiru, but it wasn't until Yisro came along and said Baruch Hashem that Matan Torah happened. So this is what the Zohar is trying to explain. And it explains another issue, which is, why is he saying Mikol HaElokim? Why is Yisro praising Hashem, and Yisro, who was the Kohen Midian, the priest of idol worship, he comes along and praises Hashem, and we know this whole thing, that he comes and Moshe Rabbeinu comes out and he honors him, he kisses him, hugs him, brings him to the tent and says, let me catch you up on everything that went down. And because of this, Yisro is Megarit, right? Yisro converts, and he says Baruch Hashem, Ve'ata Yadaiti, I know that Hashem is the greatest, and he comes and he brings a carbon. And Rashi points out that Moshe comes out. When Moshe comes out, Aaron comes out. When Aaron comes out, Nadav and Avihu come out. When Nadav and Avihu come out, the elders, the 70 elders come out. Everybody. So he's got this huge welcoming party to welcome the Kohen Midian. Right? Okay. So we're going to go back to this issue with Mikol HaElokim. So first of all, it says that Yisro was a Kohen Midian. So there's two Pirushim on this. One was that he was the king of Midian, and the other is that he was the king of, or the high priest of all idol worship. So either way, it seems like, why would they mention this? Why would this person, as we know, you're not supposed to remind somebody of their past, especially as they come to be, to be Mizgara. When a ger comes, you're not supposed to remind them that they're a ger. You're not supposed to remind a Baal Tshuva, somebody who was born Jewish, about their past. You're not supposed to remind them of that. And yet here they're saying specifically Kayin Midian. They didn't say Melech Midian, Kayin Midian, and he's the priest. Seems like a disrespect. And we know from the nature of the whole Parsha, as Moshe Rabbeinu's showering him with kavod, and the fact that the Parsha where we received Torah is called after Yisro, right? And it says that, Rashi actually says that the part of the understanding of his name, Yisro, is from Yisro, that he adds, or he, is more, that he added a book of Torah, and not just any book of Torah, but the Torah where we received the Torah is named after him. So it couldn't be that we're trying to insult Yisro by calling him the Kayin Midian. In fact, Adrabah, Pum Fakir, right? The whole point of pointing out that he was the Kayin Midian, either he's the king of Midian, he's the leader of these people, and in an even higher sense, actually, if we were to accentuate the fact that he was the high priest of all idol worship, this is the bigger Mila. And it's considered a Mila, according to Chazal. So why is that? Rashi explains, the fact that he was a Kayin Midian, he was the Kayin of all Avodah Zarah, and he knew all of it, he was Bucky and all the Narsha, the Getchkas that the whole world was familiar with davening to, because he was from that world and was the highest anybody could get in that world. When he says, Ve'ata Yadaiti, now I know, if he knows, nobody can dispute, right? Your neighbor comes along and says, oh, I know that this thing is like, hey, I need to see credentials. I need to see proof that you are qualified to even speak on this matter. This person was the high priest. It's like the Pope, and he's the Pope of every religion, comes to 770 and says, Ata Yadaiti, right? Now I know. Okay? So what's happening here is that we're actually showing his Mila, because this was a Mila. But here's the thing. It's not enough to just explain, okay, so now we know that he was the most credible, right? He was the most credible person to give this kind of kavod to Hashem, and to say, oh, according to my knowledge of all the other gods and the deities and the things, whatever they are, I have the right to say, because I know better. Because I was the high priest of all these other religions, I know. So that's good, but it doesn't change the fact that he refers to these as Elohim, Mikol Elohim, of all the gods. It's such a fascinating situation over here, right? So Rambam says, how did Avodah Zarah happen? So the world was created by Hashem, and Hashem created the world through these different intermediaries, both physical and spiritual, right? We see the stars and the moon. The moon literally affects things like the tide and all these different things. So the physical luminaries, the physical things that Hashem created, literally control and have it has an effect on our physical world. So he clearly created these physical intermediaries to help in creation. But on top of that, he also created spiritual ones that we can't even see, but they're there. And these things were created in order to create a system where existence runs smoothly. But it's not that he created them and then bounced. He created them and is continuously creating through them. It's a system, but he's creating through that system. So the error happened when over the generations, first they knew this. First, the whole world knew that Hashem created these things in order to create and continue the world. But they started to think, oh, we ain't heard from him in a while, but we got these luminaries. We got this. We have the angels and other different things. So they started to give their respect and their honor to the things that they feel a direct connection with, right? And we know the Kabbalah explains that according to Gematria, the word Elohim is Gematria HaTeva, nature. So existence, as we know it, is directly related to the the manifestation of God that we refer to as Elohim, which is the creative aspect, the feminine aspect. The Shechina is Elohim, right? Part of Shechenes is dwells in our world, and even in the higher worlds. So these spiritual beings and the physical beings start to get worshipped by people because they see the power of God in them. So this Getchka does this thing. After you forget that it's Hashem really just working through it, they start to show it cover. So what happens? It's referred to as kagarzen biyara chaytzev bay. It's saying to worship or to thank the axe in the hand. It's not the axe that did the work. It's the hand that does the work. It's the person that's doing the work in this muscle. And so in the nimshal, in the explanation of this analogy, you don't praise these things. You don't praise the creations that were made in order for us to exist the way that we do. They exist for us. And we're going to praise them? Yes, they're greater than we are in so many different ways, and they're closer to Hashem. But the higher you get, the less they even have a sense of self. How can you praise something that doesn't even really exist? It's just an extension of Hashem. So Rambam says that this is how Avodah Zarah started. So the fact that Yisro comes along and says, oh, I understand that Hashem says Havaya, right? The God that is transcendent is greater than all of Elohim. He's pointing out from his perspective, having understood the way that nature works, the way that these powers and these spiritual entities work, that it's all Hashem. That it's all Hashem. And so that's what he's pointing out here. And then he brings like this, he says, that's from Koheles. Yeah. So the whole point of pointing out that Yisro understood with his knowledge going into it, he understands the greatness of these other spiritual entities and physical entities. That all these different things, they exist and they have power, right? There's a Gemara, it's not in the Sikha, but there's a Gemara where they come to one of the Chachamim, I think it's Rabbi Akiva, if hopefully somebody will fact check this, but they come to him and they say, how come these people that are across the street, they're going into this base of Avodah Zarah and they come out the other side perfect? Somebody goes in missing a limb, God forbid, or they're sick or whatever it is, and they come out the other side healed. And so the Chacham says it works, but it's not emes. We're expected to do what Hashem said. So to if you want to get something done, and you go directly to the manager of whatever branch you need this thing happening from, they might be able to do it for you. Might be easier, less involvement. They'll do it for you right away. But when your father is the CEO of the company, how do you think that makes him feel? Oh, they did that for you? Okay, good. I'm happy they did that for you. I would have given it to you anyway. Because it's not like they can do anything against Hashem. Right? The intermediaries can't do anything that Hashem doesn't want them to do. Hashem would rather you just came to me. You just come to me. What do you need to go to them for? But, hey, okay. So that's what it is. And so Yisro understood this because of his knowledge and his awareness of the spiritual world. Okay, so here's what's crazy. So the Zohar says, there's a pasuk that says, "V'ra'isi ani sheyesh Yisron l'chacham min ha'sichlus." Says that I saw there's a maila, a Yisroin, a maila, an advantage in wisdom over foolishness. Okay? And what it means, and the Zohar is explaining, is that when a person can mahapech the wisdom of foolishness into holy wisdom, it reaches a madrega that no other wisdom can reach. Because the whole point of this physical world, or this world, even the spiritual world, any form of something that is the sitra achra, There's the side of godliness, of holiness, and there's the other side. So the only reason the other side exists is so that it can be transformed into godliness. So with this pasuk from Koheles, I think it is, from Koheles is saying, and the Zohar is explaining that the advantage in the foolishness is that when it becomes transformed to holiness, it's a higher madrega of holiness. It's a higher level altogether. So what happens? Okay. Yisro comes along, and he comes to learn about the Torah. He hears about all these things, right? It says that Yisro heard Vayishamu Yisro. He heard, and then he came to Moshe Rabbeinu in the wilderness. He comes out to them, and it says that he brought Zipporah and the children, and he comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu then tells him about everything that went down, and then he converts. Okay. Now, what Yisro is doing is coming and he's mevarer this chachma that he had. He's transforming the wisdom of all of the narishkeit that he knew, and he's bringing it to holiness, right? Because what happened was this elevation of the foolishness of his knowledge is what triggered Matan Torah. It wasn't that the order of events was this happened and then Yisro came and then he came just in time. He came just in time because it wasn't going to happen until he came. That's what I mean. So this is what's happening. The greatness of Yisro's involvement with Matan Torah is that he triggered it. This was the catalyst. So he goes on to say like this. There was a gezerah that Hashem made. There was a decree that the spiritual world and the physical world are two separate things, right? It says that before the giving of the Torah, it says that the Avos used to fulfill the mitzvahs, and they used the example of tefillin. That they used the tefillin. What would they do? They would take tree bark or whatever it is, and they would wrap it around their arms. That would be the symbol, right? That was what it was. And then when they were done with it, they threw it away, because the Kedusha didn't permeate that physical thing. But after Har Sinai, the giving of the Torah, the Gezerah was lifted, and he says everything that is holy can descend, and he says it the other way actually, everything that is down here can ascend on high, and everything that is holy can descend down here. And so what happened is now you have tefillin, right? You shech the behema and take a skin and make tefillin straps. You do the mitzvah one time, and now there's Kedusha. Even when they're preparing it, you're supposed to say L'Shem mitzvah tefillin. L'Shem mitzvah. You write the L'Shem kedusha tefillin. And you're saying that I'm doing this in preparation for this mitzvah and the holiness. So what happens is when that mitzvah is fulfilled, the godliness that was drawn down by that mitzvah stays in that physical thing. It permeates that physical thing. So now you have this marriage between these two worlds of the physical and the spiritual. And Yisro is what caused this. Okay. Question is, why wasn't the Yam Suf enough for this? Right? We talked, I think it was last week, about the splitting of the sea being this whole idea of the sea covers and hides what's underneath it. So too, godliness, or the koyach eloki, the godliness of the godly aspect that restricts and constrains the godliness so that we don't see it, we don't perceive it, so that we can exist, essentially, so that this physical world can exist. He restrains himself, and so that concealment of godliness is like the sea, which conceals what's underneath. And the splitting of the sea was the revealing of the depths of the sea, which was dry land. So turning it from the sea, from the Yam Suf, from Yam to Yabasha, to land. And that land represents the Gilui, the revelation of godliness, the revelation of what's underneath the sea. So that's clearly the same inyan of marrying these two worlds. So why wasn't that enough? And in fact, he points out that when Rashi says that that Yisro came, he points out that what did Yisro hear? When it says that Yisro heard everything that had happened and he came. When it says ba and he came, what's he referring to that he came? That Rashi says it was the splitting of the sea and the war with Amalek. So the question is, why does he single out the war with Amalek? Why doesn't he say the victory with Amalek? Why doesn't he say the other plagues? Why specifically, why not the drowning of the Mitzrayim? Why was it the splitting of the sea and the war with Amalek? Yisro understood that the splitting of the sea was the first time that the two worlds, the spiritual world and the physical world, had been joined, had come together, had been connected. What made him come to Moshe Rabbeinu, to the wilderness, was the fact that after that occurred, there was a war with Amalek. Not the victory, not any of that. How could it be that after the splitting of the sea occurred, that there is even a potential for a Melchemes Amalek? That's what bothered him. He recognized, that wasn't enough. The Yam Suf wasn't enough to complete the process. He knew what had to be done. He came out. He accepted and acknowledged the greatness of Hashem because he heard about the Yam Suf, so he knew that it was real, but he saw that the job hadn't been completed. So it was up to him. So he comes out. He expresses Baruch Hashem, V'ata Yadaiti, right? The godless of Hashem over Mikola Elikim. It was Yisro specifically transforming his knowledge of Avodah Zarah, the lowest possible thing in the world. His ability to transform that, he knew was going to be what it was going to take in order to bring down Matan Torah. And so every day we're supposed to do this exact same thing. The Rebbe brings that every day when we say Naisen HaTorah, the bracha on receiving the Torah, we say Naisen HaTorah. Not that he gave the Torah, but that he gives the Torah. So every day we're supposed to see this exact same thing, that our job is to elevate the lowest points of our day. So every day you go to work, you know everything that you do, everything, it says V'chol d'rachecha v'yadehu, to know Hashem in all the things that you do. And so this is this idea that everything that you do is this connection between the higher world and the lower world. First of all, when you say brachas and the mitzvahs and everything like that. And that's why when Yisro says Baruch Hashem, the lashon of Baruch is hamshacha, is drawing down, bringing down. Right? Chazal says hamavrich the geffen, when a person wants to plant a vine, there's different ways of planting, and one of those is bringing a vine that already exists on a plant that is alive and growing in its own thing, and taking that vine and burying the vine in the ground, and that from that place of burial of that vine, a new plant will come out. So the idea of mavrich, of bringing down the vine, is where the word baruch comes from. So when Yisro says Baruch Hashem, it's Yisro drawing down this level of Havaya into the revealed world. I mean, it's the most incredible thing, and Yisro does it. Yisro does it. That's why Matan Torah is given in Parshas Yisro, because he was able to do it. He was able to bring this Hamshachas of Hashem by transforming the himself and the lowest parts of what he knew.